Leanne Kunze. I'm the Executive Director of the Federation. And we have Steve Siegel from our bargaining team here, and we have our Communications Director, Justin Lee, also with us on the panel. With that, I'd like to just kind of give an overview of the situation and the contract. As you know, bargaining team was elected late last year, got in place early this year. And we were looking at a budget surplus in the state of Washington, and we were really excited about the opportunity to continue the trend of building our contract and growing wins. Unfortunately, as we all know, COVID hit, and this pandemic has taken a significant toll on the state budget, and there's still a lot of uncertainty at this point. The state budget forecast is a gap of close to $9 billion. That's billion with a B. That includes this fiscal year, which is the second year of your existing contract, and the full next biennium. So that's through June 30th of 2023. For anyone who was around during the recession about a decade ago, we were looking at a gap of about 1 billion. So you think about what the impacts were then, and you take that times 9, and it's pretty devastating. And I gotta say, thankfully, your union was in a position to be able to discuss and educate the employer on a lot of the provisions within the Federal CARES Act that allowed us an opportunity to find budget savings early on. As we know, the sooner you're able to attack a problem, the sooner you're able to recover from it. And so instead of austerity measures happening during this year, this second year of this contract, we were able to prevent a clawback of the 3% that went into effect on July 1. And we're able to implement the effects of furloughs in a way that allowed access to expanded benefits through the CARES Act, that allowed the furloughs in this year to not have a devastating impact on income. Unfortunately, the Federal CARES Act expires at the end of this year, 2020, so December. And unless Congress enacts additional legislation, future furloughs will not be so kind, but yet they remain the preferred method of a temporary layoff that's spread across evenly versus permanent cuts and permanent layoffs that would only exacerbate the economic situation, because then that's more people who would be on unemployment, and the state pays dollar for dollar on unemployment. So we went into bargaining really having to do a 180. We went from working with a surplus to working with significant uncertainty, with projections currently, again, over the 3-year period of $9 billion gap. So in May, the bargaining team got together and reviewed that information. We have several people on the bargaining team who actually were part of the recession 10 years ago and remembered what happened when austerity or cuts or permanent layoffs were chosen over temporary furloughs. And what was done in that process was a temporary salary reduction. So it was actually a reduction of your wages, and then they gave you leave in return. What we have the opportunity to do, and what the bargaining team negotiated, was furloughs that are truly, you don't go to work. And so that's the income loss. But you would continue to receive your step increases and hold the line on healthcare at the 85-15 split, which means 85% monthly premium paid by the employer, 15% paid by the employee. And during the last recession, some of the models that had come to the table went as low as 75-25. There was significant concern that we were going to be looking at our healthcare switching to 80% employer paid and 20% employee paid. And once that percent changes, that is not something you get back. And so that would be long-term loss of that income or increased expenses on state workers. So we limited to holding the line, really, so we can maintain the structure and the strength of our contract so that we have the staffing levels necessary to continue the services that Washingtonians rely on to get us out of this pandemic and safely open the economy. In the meantime, we know we have a significant fight ahead of us. This is just one battle along the way. So we have this tentative agreement. We are, at the bargaining team is recommending a yes vote that allows us to then pivot our attention and our resources towards ensuring that we are electing representatives who truly will put people first and really look to unrig the system that has more of the tax responsibility and burden on working folks than those who are technically profiting off of this pandemic, who pay little or no taxes to the state of Washington to ensure the level of services that we provide. With that, I will pivot to a screen share so I can show and walk through the summary of the general government contract. And I'm just going to make this a little bit more visually presentable. And we'll start at the top. And so we'll go in order of the articles in the contract of where changes were made. We're happy that we were able to achieve some additional improvements in addition to simply holding the line, which in and of itself was a victory under these circumstances. So in Article 2, non-discrimination, we updated the document with the latest definitions, and the employer has agreed to include a hyperlink on the posting of the contract on the website that would go to the state law that defines the protected groups for discrimination, so that any additional changes that could happen after ratification would be up to date in that. So Article 4, hiring and appointments, we incorporated some grievance settlement language for clarity in areas where the employer posts and in the post indicates that they will be using it to fill more than one position. It provides a timeline of what they can use an employee pool or hiring pool so that we don't have that disparity and subjectiveness. It makes it more objective and predictable. It also adds that in writing in an appointment letter, when somebody moves from a one position to another, what the return rights are in that movement. So sometimes people have assumed that they had return rights and didn't, and maybe would not have done the transfer or move had they known that. So we're making sure that that is information that is known in writing up front in the appointment letter.
Yeah, and I will chime in here, Leanne, that this is important. It's rather technical, but oftentimes when people got a non-permanent appointment, they did not realize that their return rights were either non-existent or may have lapsed or may have been at risk, depending upon whether that temporary appointment was renewed. And so the way the language had been, it basically came as a surprise, and it was always an unpleasant surprise. So this was really important that it be in the appointment letter so that people that didn't know, which is most of us, because we're looking forward and not looking at returning, that they understood that they had return rights. And so it was really critical that people be aware of this on the front end so that they weren't surprised. So this was really an important get. It's something that we were trying to get for several cycles, and we finally did. So thank you.
Absolutely. In addition to that, another written reason that needs to be provided is if a person is in a non-permanent position and then they move into a permanent position, if the employer is not counting the time while they were in the non-permanent position towards their probation or trial service, they have to provide that reason in writing. That also allows us an opportunity to be monitoring those reasons, because there's concern that there are agencies who really abuse that discretion, and that allows us an opportunity to gather information and hold the employer accountable. In Article 6, we have hours of work. We added the DBA work week, which is the Veterans Affairs, to comply with the Fair Labor Standards Act, and also incorporated into Article 6 existing memorandum of understanding language that had been reached with Health and Human Services and Child and Youth Services. And that is under section 6.17, shift exchange. And in Article 14, shared leave, we were able to improve the language regarding the definition of a family member. We also were able to clarify on parental leave and updated with the benefits per legislative changes since the last ratification, which would have been fall of 2018. Article 15, under the family medical leave, pregnancy, disability leave, same thing, updating that to comply with changes in law. Article 17, miscellaneous paid leave, was updated to expand to existing law. And again, where the language was clarified in Article 14, it matches that language in Article 17 for consistency purposes. In Article 21, uniform, tools, and equipment, there's expanded access to the current reimbursement that is available for safety footwear, where the Department of Transportation employees would also be able to access that same reimbursement for accessories such as steel toe, soles, and other safety features for safety footwear. So it's not additional money, it's additional access to use the money that is already there for accessories for safety footwear. Article 33, seniority, we clarified language regarding how hours are calculated for seniority, where it ensures that a part-time person who's working a lot of overtime doesn't surpass a normal year's worth of hours to be able to pass up a full-time employee in seniority. It also added a reference that in case of a tie in seniority in layoff and recall purposes, to ensure that that language was clear on how that would impact folks who were involved in the IT professional structure. The IT did the statewide implementation last year that went into effect July 1. And there are a lot of appeals that are still going on, and we want to make sure there was a reference for that. We do notice, it has been pointed out, that the document that the employer sent us regarding Article 33 may be missing a piece of that information. And so we will make sure we have that out right now to the employer to confirm, and we'll send out any update on that. Folks who are impacted by ITPS are the only ones who would probably be interested in that language. It only applies there. Article 34, layoff and recall. We again added reference for those who are impacted by the ITPS implementation, IT professional structure, again implemented in July of last year. Article 42, compensation. This is a removal of references to the 2018 implementation of the minimum wage. And this is also the document that has the language that continues your steps or periodic increment dates of when you would continue to move through your salary range on your anniversary date. So we were able to hold the line and continue that. At the beginning of bargaining, it was an absolute freeze, so that whatever anyone was making as of June 30th of next year is what they would be making for the following 2 years. And a significant fight, and we thank all of you who participated in actions to make sure the employer was aware how critical it is that in holding the line, it allows people to continue to move through the steps that that reflect the work in that job towards the getting to that top pay.
Right, and if I can chime in, the steps are referenced in the general service salary schedule, and it goes from step A through step M. And generally when you start a new position, you start somewhere between step A, step D, maybe step F, it depends. It really is more of a training wage because they start you at a lower amount. After you've been doing it for a while, you get a step increase up to step L, which is the highest step until you have 6 years at step L, and then you get step M. So it was real critical, that these step increases are, the steps we've always looked at it as sort of a training wage. They're paying you less because, you're relatively new. But once you learn the job, you should be at step L. And once you've been in that position for 6 years, you get to step M, which we got back about 8 years ago, as part of the, clawing back after the Great Recession. When we weren't getting any money, were able to get a step M raise, and that was 2.5% raise that we were able to hide by virtue of the fact that it was based only on longevity. So it was really important that we keep the longevity in there, also because we didn't want to interfere with folks who may have been at year 2 or year 3 at step L and reset them where they had to have another 6 consecutive years at step L to go to step M. So this was a big keep and also actual real dollars for folks during the next biennium if you approve this contract that we will continue to get our step raises, including step M if you qualify. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And so next is Article 43, healthcare benefits amounts. And this is something that is actually achieved at a separate table that is a coalition of labor unions that work for the state. We actually lead that table, and we're able to maintain the 85-15 premium split. It also maintains the wellness benefit of $125 per year that comes off of the deductible. It also maintains the $250 for low-income workers to have that, to achieve that additional opportunity through health savings towards their deductibles. And we did agree to exclude the $25 Amazon gift card. And other than that, everything remains the same in healthcare. Article 53, distribution of agreement. We agreed that the printed copies that the employer pays for that go to our 24/7 operations staff would not include the printing of the salary schedules, excluding folks who need it in Braille. And that is strictly the ones the employer prints. And the reason is some cost savings, some environmental awareness, and the fact that existing overruns of the current contract would have the same salary schedules that can be referenced. And so it made sense to agree to that savings. And Article 54, term of agreement, was updated to reflect the dates of the agreement going into effect July 1 of 2021 and continuing through June 30th of 2023. And as you can see, Appendix A, B, and C are highlighted. The reason they're highlighted is based on the fact that you will not see them if you click on the link on the website to see the full tentative agreement. And that is because they are pending the Attorney General's Office Pro Staff accretion MOU. And what that means is that you gained about 500 new siblings into this contract from the AGO's Pro Staff group, who formed their union and become part of this general government contract. They are currently in negotiations on how they accrete into the existing contract, and then these areas get updated with their information and then get attached to the existing contract. Appendix G was the minimum wage article, and as referenced earlier, that the 2018 implementation of the minimum wage is complete. Therefore, that Appendix G was removed. And because we had a new appendix created for a new telework appendix, we decided to slot it into G so that we didn't have to then go through and renumber all the other appendices that follow. And so Appendix G, you will see a copy of the expired minimum wage, followed by a copy of the new Appendix G that would become the telework appendix. And that appendix is another win where we took the existing memorandum of understanding for telework, improved it, and now it is part of the contract. And so with improvements, it also allows for, instead of future contracts having to bargain to maintain the memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding about telework, it automatically remains in the contract unless we decide that we don't, want it or changes. So that is a significant win.
Yeah, and this was a real important for our bargaining team, and maybe the only bright spot of COVID was that, with the governor's directive, to keep his workforce safe, our workforce safe, telework was implemented while there had been an executive order authorizing it. Management resistance prevented that from happening at the level we would have liked to have seen it at. So with COVID and the public health emergency, it was implemented rather speedily, and shows how we can adapt to do this work remotely. So it's real important that we make this part of the contract so that it is not purely management discretion, that there's some metrics that have to be applied so that people who want to telework and whose job lends itself to telework can do so. So this was really a big win in the contract. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So the last appendix that's listed here is Appendix O, assignment pay. And that was updated where there's a reference that exists currently that allows assignment pay for DOT employees who are assigned to remove illegal encampments that are in the right-of-way. And that was expanded so that it is about any work that is assigned in or removing. So not necessarily limited to removing illegal encampments, but any work that they are doing that is assigned in encampments in right-of-way. And then we have a significant number of MOUs, which stands for Memorandum of Understanding. So you're going to hear me say MOU a lot. We'll start with the big one, which is the budget savings MOU regarding economics, where the employer is implementing 24 furlough days over the 2 years. And so we bargained the effects of that implementation so that it is 1 day per month, that a day is defined as 8 hours, and that if you are less than a full-time employee, that your furlough would be prorated accordingly. And with that, it also has a reopener that is actually effective upon the execution of this contract. Since we bargained so far ahead of time, it allows us to reopen July 1 and begin bargaining prior to July 15th of next year. And that would be not only about furloughs of, do we really need that? We know we need it now in order for the employer to meet the October 1 deadline for this to be found fiscally feasible, so that it will be included in the governor's budget, so that it makes it an up or down vote for the legislature, and not allowing the legislature any windows into messing with any of our compensation or contractor benefits. And so with that, it also recognizes that should things get worse as far as the budget, that we would have the opportunity at that point to have new information of what that looks like, so that we maybe, we could either be looking at things getting better. Do we maybe not need to do all 24 furloughs? Are we able to suspend furloughs in the second year? Or is it possible that the employer is looking at needing more furloughs in order to prevent permanent cuts or permanent layoffs? And those are things that they would have to provide us notice for, when and if they wanted to access that. And we would bargain the impacts and include members to ensure that we have a work group that is in a position to speak on behalf of the membership and bring it back for a vote. It also includes consideration of adding a personal leave day that would be taken in the month of June in honor of Juneteenth. And that holiday is a commemoration of ending slavery in this country and a celebration of the additional progress that we all have the responsibility to carry forward. There is a possibility that that could become a paid state holiday based on legislation next year. However, if not, it allows us the opportunity for adding that personal leave day, which the first June of the next contract wouldn't be until June of 22. So we've got time. The next MOU is, oh, go ahead.
Real quick. We wanted to avoid the problem we had with the 2009 contract with the Great Recession. We reached an agreement and ratified it in September of 2008. And that's when the Great Recession happened a few weeks later, when the stock market tanked and all the Wall Street investment firms were going broke. So Governor Gregoire at the time found that her budget office found that the contract that we had negotiated, which had, I believe, a 1% and 1% increase in COLAs, was not financially feasible. So we had to go back to the bargaining table to get 0 and 0. So it was real important to us that we, have a memorandum of understanding that showed the budget savings so that the governor's office could submit this to the legislature as financially feasible, and we can get this contract approved by the legislature, and that we're not being jammed to try and, save something to renew our contract. So we're being proactive in making sure that this can go to the legislature. And the Juneteenth potential personal leave day, we got an extra personal leave day in the 2011 contract, or as I like to characterize it, as every dog gets a bone. We wanted to lay the groundwork so that we get this bone, because we're not getting a COLA in this contract, but we want to make sure that we lay the groundwork that our members get something. And if that's in the next contract, then we want to be proactive to lay the groundwork for that. Thank you.
Thanks again, Steve. Next we have the MOU on the IT professional structure. That is an existing MOU, and it was continued with some clarifications so that it is still attached to this contract, this next contract, for those who may not have their appeal finalized until the next bargaining, until the next biennium. The MOU, an existing MOU on agriculture regarding overtime, was renewed, and that's regarding an OT provision that applies to those in the grain program. We have the CDL wellness, so those who require the commercial driver license, that it's an additional wellness incentive that is available to that. That was renewed. There was an existing MOU regarding the DCYF, which was a new agency created that broke off of DSHS. So when that was created, they had to do their benefit calculate, or their benefit, I can't think of the word, I'm trying to think, election. And so that has already been done. So that MOU expires because the work's already been done. There's an existing MOU that added the DES consolidated mail, and that was renewed. We have a new MOU on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a document that is critical in acknowledging the parties' role and commitment to admitting that there are systemic oppression issues, not only in our country, but in our workplaces, and that we all have a responsibility to address that, and that we are going to need expert facilitation so that folks can be met where they're at and allow the opportunity to grow and encourage more healthy work environments. And then hopefully that will, spill over into our families and communities, state, country, and world. The MOU for DOC after hours protocol, that was a work group. That work is done, and so that expired. There's an MOU on for DOC, and that's Department of Corrections, on mandatory arming, and that work group is renewed. So that is a renewed memorandum. Another MOU, and that is for Department of Transportation, is the equipment premium list, and that updated the list of job classes that are eligible for Schedule C. We have also for DOT an MOU on work apparel that was renewed. And we have a few MOUs regarding DSHS. One is the comp time for holidays for the 24/7 facilities. That is a work group that did some really good work and passed this memorandum that went into effect just this past February, and that was renewed with a reopener for possible addition of Juneteenth if it becomes a paid holiday. That was another fight. We have an MOU at DSHS that involved Eastern and Western State Hospital, and that information was done and expired. We have an MOU on shift exchange that was mentioned earlier about Article 6. That language was moved so that it shows up in Article 6. An MOU for DSHS SOLA, state operated living arrangements, and that is also a renewed existing MOU. And then there's DSHS vacation scheduling for LPNs at 24/7 facilities, and that was also renewed. And while it was being renewed, we took the opportunity to update the new name where CDHL is now CDHY, and that's the Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Youth. We have the MOU on the dues deduction and status report, which is Article 40, and that would move the existing MOU improvements to Article 40 language. We also have an MOU DVA, again, veterans on leave attendance and overtime. That was continued. We also have an MOU for the ecology work crew that had added to our contract after ratification last time. That remains in effect. We have the ESD non-permanent appointments. That was a existing memorandum of understanding, and that was renewed. We also renewed the MOU on non-permanent paid internship staff development. We also renewed the Parks UMC, and then the WSHS amendment appendix actually was moved to Appendix B, and that has to do with the Historical Society that joined our union after ratification, and they have the need for inherent flexibility, which is what Appendix B lists. So that moved to Appendix B. And lastly, we had an MOU that outlined investigations involving our state patrol folks, and that also was renewed. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. And if people want to see the actual, like legislative tracking markup, if you go to our website, wfc.org, and click on ratification information, you can click and see this document that I'm sharing right now. And you could also click right below it for a full summary that goes through the actual documents that show existing language with any changes, and then any new documents would not show any markup because they would be considered new parts of the contract. So before I switch over to the Q&A, I would like, and thank you, Justin. If you go in your chat, for those of you who are participating on the platform, the link has been updated for you there. It's something that I would recommend you click on now, so it's something that's opened on your browser, so that when this meeting ends, that you still have access to that link. But before I go to Q&A, I'd like to just give an opportunity for our president, Mike Yestramski, to address and maybe discuss anything about the process of bargaining, and maybe do a reiteration on a pitch for the vote yes.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys can, hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm in between meetings, so I'm on my iPad at this moment. I'm not sure, it doesn't look like my video is looking great, but whatever, that's fine. So thanks again all for being here. And there we go. Sorry about that. So thanks again all for being here. Yeah, I think Steve, Leanne did a pretty good job of going through the sort of the challenges that we faced. I think that realistically, you know, back in January, February, when we first started gearing up for this, we obviously had different expectations of what would be coming out of this contract, what we could win, you know, and then unfortunately, you know, we had a global pandemic that resulted in a massive economic depression and put us in a bit of a difficult spot. That said, maintaining the steps, maintaining the healthcare split, and getting a lot of the language around, as was mentioned, telework, comp time, all of those things into this new agreement, I think was huge. I think that we also got some rely and a commitment from the state to really focus on improving our outcomes when it comes to diversity within the hiring process. So all of that, you know, should be looked at as wins. I also think that given the alternatives, I think also Steve had mentioned what could be coming down the pike from the legislature, making sure that we vote yes for this TA, get this ratified, and get this locked up is huge, both on the short term, but also for the long term for all of our members. You know, we did try to take into account things like how this would affect people's retirements, leave time, all of those things. And I think, again, given the circumstances, our team, who worked well into the night, many, many, many days, did just an amazing job of really getting a strong TA, despite, again, the factors that we have. So with that, I would invite you to look at the agreement. If you have any questions, please reach out to the MCC or your field rep, or even, you know, I can put my email in the chat, which I will do, or any of your other bargaining team members. But we do encourage you to get on, vote yes to ratify, and then immediately from there, we're gonna, you know, pivot to making sure that the state does the right thing and fixes our revenue system to make sure that we're not put in this position, hopefully, ever again. So thanks all for being here.
Thanks, Mike. And speaking of that, as far as pivoting after the tentative agreement hopefully is ratified and moving towards those elections and holding folks accountable, hopefully it's not new to you to hear about the People First campaign that your union has kicked off. So if that's something, Justin, you can maybe add that link into the chat also, but it's an important statewide effort. And other public sector unions are also expressing interest in a coalition on this, of really making sure that elected officials are putting the people first, and that we are investing and not adding to the economic woes with austerity measures that we know do not work. So we have a question about how much savings we're looking at with the implementation of mandatory furloughs. I'm just going to quick do a share screen so you can actually see the numbers. You guys able to hopefully see that. So it shows the first year, the compounding effect, and what this is general fund and other fund savings. And then you add in the second year that compounds for a total here at the end of over 125 million. And that's with the 12 days annually. All right, so I'm just gonna stop share so I can open up the questions again.
And just let me, if I may add, part of the reason we were able to hold the line on our healthcare benefits was because we bargained that in a coalition with other unions that have contracts with the state. So there are Teamsters, SEIU, Nurses Association. So there are a bunch of unions. They also needed to pitch in to show savings, and that's not in the spreadsheet that Leanne just put up, so that we could hold the line on our healthcare costs. I believe that was $170 million of savings that we needed to show to be able to hold the line on healthcare. And as Leanne said, that's really critical. In 2008, or for the 2009-11 contract, our healthcare costs went from 88.12 on the premium split to 85.15. And we tried to get some of that back 2 years ago, and we were not successful. Those healthcare keeps going up. It cost money to keep it the same. So anytime we can hold the line on healthcare is a big win, because it keeps going up every biennium. Thank you.
Yeah, just the status quo healthcare was over $400 million, and so that we have to, we have to assume that, and there's a cost involved, and with money not being available, we have to find that savings elsewhere. And again, if with furloughs and doing things proactively, it allows us to maintain our staffing levels as close to the current structure as possible, maintains the structure of the contract, so we have that strength to continue the next fight. It's kind of like that, if you think about in wartime, right? Holding the line is a victory in that battle, which allows you to then proceed and not lose ground. So we had a question from Sarah. The announcement indicated that we were able to maintain step increases. I couldn't find any mention of it in the summary that was sent to us. Can you clarify what the step increases are? So yes, if you go to the existing contract, you can see in Article 42 that on your anniversary date, and it's called a periodic increment date, which we all call steps, because if you look at the salary grid and the salary structure, you'll see multiple steps that go from A to M. So you heard Steve talk about the M step. The M step is a longevity step where you have to serve 6 years at L before you're eligible for M. And so as you move through those steps, it's actually 2 steps on each anniversary date, and that language remains whole in Article 42. The steps are about 2.5%, so roughly 5% increase annually if you're still moving through the wages, or through the steps. Is there any language to maintain our workplace locations? In other words, can we be forced to move with any centralization that may come? Also, can you reiterate the furlough for the next 2 years? Will there be 1 a month or 2 a month? So the first question, your duty location, I can tell you, as far as like with telework, we made sure that jobs remain connected to a duty station, so that you, multiple reasons, so that if you're not teleworking, you know where you can go. And then also to ensure that it protects your private address if your teleworking is from home, so that that's not subject to public disclosure as your workplace. As far as any centralization that may come, we have not been made aware of any of that. Should there be any, they are responsible to send us a mandatory notice that allows us to take a look at that and demand to bargain any impacts. And then as far as—
If I can chime in on the centralization, some folks have commented during the pendency of the bargaining that the state will save a lot of money with all these folks teleworking. The state already has lease commitments, and also they have to maintain these duty stations throughout those lease commitments. So any savings in real estate costs is going to be in the future over a period of time. It's nothing that can be recognized in the next few months. It's something that will be recognized over, at least over a 5-year period of time. As far as I know, a lot of the state leases are at least 5 years long if they don't own the property. So the management has the right to relocate. They might get relocate to another building with another lease, but they do have to give us notice. We do get to bargain the impact of that change. Thank you.
Right. And then the second question that was involved there was about reordering the furlough. So in the contract, the employer already has access to 30 days under temporary layoffs, which is what furlough is, temporary. And so instead of it being a chunk, it's 1 day per month. 24 is what they've implemented. They have access to 6 more based on that 30 that's in the contract, but that would still require notice. And we know that there have been significant amount of emails that have gone out to folks from agencies who are submitting their budgets. And a lot of that is budget exercise because they have to meet these targets. And at the same time, as you've seen, they usually put the most popular programs on the line, not only to make us mad and fight, but to make the general public mad and fight and recognize, is this really what you want for the state of Washington? Or are you going to get on board with making sure that we are making the proper investments with our legislature? And then also hoping that Congress is going to step up and pass, whether it's the HEROES Act or some semblance of it, of what has passed the House and has been sitting for months, or other type of stimulus for state and local government, to be able to provide the services that Washingtonians depend on. And so it is 1 per month. Again, we have the reopener of July right as this contract would take effect, in hopes that we will be able to reduce that number, but also in recognition that if things don't go well with the economy, it could be that the employer is seeking to increase that number. So let's see here. The next one is, how long can a state employee take advantage of unemployment? My understanding is that it is a year long. Is there information on an extension? Right now, being furloughed isn't as much of a hardship due to the unemployment. If it dries up, it becomes significant reduction of income. You're absolutely right, Robert. That is the epitome of where we're at. Currently, because of the shared work program being available, in addition to the federal funds that are available through the CARES Act that Congress enacted, goes through December 26th of this year. If that is not extended, and if Congress or the state does not enact legislation that provides benefits with unemployment, then it's back to regular unemployment, which most would not be qualified for with a loss of 1 day per month. And that is true. That is the true realization of a loss of income, that 1 day per month for both years. Thankfully, the step increases in both years allow the wages to advance so that your pension contributions, any overtime, anything that is based on salary is not a salary reduction. You're actually moving through steps and holding on, so that when we come out of this in the end, we're in a position to continue to move forward. Any raises after step M? There are not. So again, step M is considered a longevity step, which means we have, you've met like kind of the top of the scale. You've put in your years where you're kind of considered an expert at your job, and then you get the longevity step 6 years later, and then there are not additional longevity steps after that. In years where the economy is good, any across the board or general wage increase is applied across the board, and so then step M would increase, like what happened on July 1st, just this last year, where everybody received the 3% increase.
And just to add on to that, we did, prior to the pandemic, we did have discussions around trying to add a step N, and working with that. We do hope to have that in future CBAs, but again, as we mentioned, given the economic reality that we're facing right now, that just was a non-starter for this contract.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that Sister Sarah Wilson in the chat pointed out, and so I may have misspoke, but the shared work program is a program that is available through Washington ESD. What makes that program beneficial right now is because of the fact that the employer participating in the shared work program allows for a greater unemployment benefit for the employee. But right now it's the CARES Act that allowed for the expanded unemployment benefit that had that additional $600 a week if you received any unemployment. That went through the end of July. And then the remainder of the CARES Act that is beneficial for the state participating in the shared work program this year is that it is fully reimbursed by the federal government. So those are all savings to the state. So once that expires at the end of this year, there is not a financial benefit to the state to participate in the shared work program. And therefore the state would not reapply to participate in the shared work program in the next contract period because it would not create savings, it would actually create cost. A question about furloughs between this November and the beginning of the next contract. We have not received any notice of any additional furloughs. We have the existing furlough agreement in place that had the 4 in July and then an additional 4 between August and November. We do not, we do not have any inkling of any additional for this particular fiscal year. What we have in place is an implementation of the 12 per year in the next contract cycle. I think it's important, like what Brother Weissman pointed out in the chat, is it was your union that brought that information to the employer for proactive measures to have budget savings currently so that it wouldn't be additional furloughs, and to do it while the CARES Act was in place so that employees had access to those expanded benefits, so that in this particular furlough process, people who participate in the shared work program would actually come out ahead when you come to net income, when you take your income plus the additional expanded benefits from unemployment. People could have gained anywhere from $14 to $2,000 depending on your income. So of course, the $14 is, would be people who are at a higher wage, and the people who are at lower wage benefited greater. And so it was a progressive opportunity to be able to provide that budget savings to the state, while the employees, definitely jumping through hoops to do the furlough and shared work program. And for those who had their accounts hacked by, outside criminals, and some who are still working on their unemployment claims, it's a double-edged sword there. But for the majority of folks who participated in that program, they received their unemployment claims and that additional income, so that this current furlough process that we're in was not a loss of income. And that is very different than the furloughs that we are looking at the employer implementing in this next contract period, because they are true furloughs that would currently not be part of any shared work program. And currently there's no legislation that would suggest that there's going to be expanded benefits or any federal funds. We are fighting for that. We expect all of you to be joining in that fight. And that's the clarification on those. What we are hearing as far as the projection is a gap of billion with a B, and that includes this fiscal year and the full next biennium. And it's going to take movement from Congress to inject funds, and also improving our revenue structure and system here in Washington State through our legislature next session. It will take both of those things to allow this this contract to maintain moving forward. So we've got a fight ahead of us. And again, I would suggest checking the chat for the link that Justin provided in there for the People First campaign about getting involved, making sure we are electing people who truly want to represent and invest in people and public services, and also to reduce the tax responsibility that is currently disproportionately placed on the backs of working people and not on the people who are profiting off of this pandemic that has caused our economic struggle. to pay their fair share towards the society that they benefit from.
I did put in the chat a link to the Economic Revenue Forecast Council most recent report. That is the state organization that does the revenue forecast, so your budget questions can be more factually answered by the folks who are in charge of the budget. So you can get on their mailing list. I would urge you to do so, and urge you to participate in the People First campaign. Thank you.
We encourage you to go to the website, take a look at the summary. There's frequently asked questions that we have been gathering from these meetings that will be posted also. And if you're not able to find your answer that way, you have your Member Connection Center folks that are also there to assist you. And they can be reached during regular business hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, by calling 1-833-MCC-WFSE. So MCC WFSE. You can also email them so that any after hours questions can then be addressed the next business day. And that is mcc@wfse.org. And if you have not already received information regarding how to vote, you should have received information that included your 4-digit PIN that allows you access to secure online voting. If you have any issues with that, you can also contact your Member Connection Center for that. So if I can ask Justin to add that into the chat also, so that we have the MCC phone number and the MCC email. We have qualified and committed staff there to help you as a resource, and obviously available to you for other resources beyond this ratification and tentative agreement review. So if someone is on sick leave, how does ESD and shared leave benefit members? It looks like they don't get paid if on sick leave, but have to take furlough days. So I'm assuming that's a situation where somebody is sick on the day that the agency furloughs. And so that would be the furlough day. But the intent of a furlough is to take that person's wages off of the payroll of the state, not have to work for that period of time, and therefore there's a savings. So if somebody turned around and tried to say, I want to take vacation on my furlough day, or I am sick on my furlough day, that would not save money. So it is intended to be an unpaid day of no work. And then, is the future furloughs for all employees? So it's for all employees who are not in what's called a backfill position. So that in positions such as our 24/7 residential institutions, state hospitals, developmental disability, they're in situations where if you take time off, somebody else needs to fill that shift. And so many times that creates overtime. And so there is no savings involved in that. So we have, the other one that would be unique is our staff who are processing unemployment claims. The amount of workload is pretty overwhelming. That, you know, during the summer we actually had National Guard helping out, and we want to make sure that that is a service that our members are able to continue to provide at the highest level of quality possible, while folks within our organization and also outside of in the private sector are having as positive of an experience with our unemployment folks as possible under these extenuating circumstances. And so they would be exempt from furloughs. And what I've heard many people say in these 24/7 institutions is, that's my courageous duty pay. Granted, it's not the courageous duty pay that we had all hoped for. That would be additional wages on top of existing wages, in recognition of the continued public service that puts themselves and their families at risk of this novel coronavirus that has had devastating impacts with the disease COVID-19. and recognizing their commitment and dedication to serving the vulnerable populations in the direct public service, that them being excluded from furloughs is some type of recognition of that courageous duty, not having the loss of pay when we were not able to obtain courageous duty pay due to lack of funds being available. And we have one last question. Will the furlough days be pre-scheduled by management? So I can say that depends. In agencies where they do an agency-wide or enterprise-wide furlough day, like we have now, we have some who have all, that in July it was all Mondays, and now maybe it's like the first Monday of the month or the last Friday of the month. And in those agencies, they can do that so that it has the additional savings on operations by extending a weekend for things like light and heat when and if people return to offices, and some who continue to report to offices. But other than that, it is something that we expect to have flexibility and reasonableness in submitting and planning. There's plenty of time, you know, from the time the contract passes to the time that furloughs would be implemented, that there is absolutely no reason that there can't be some flexibility and planning between now and then to ensure that the furloughs, you know, are the least restrictive to the members who are providing this benefit and savings to the state. So again, I thank you all for participating here today. Brother Weissman, did you have any parting thoughts, since we had other bargaining team members be able to say a few words? You don't have to. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if there's anything you want to say, or a pitch towards your team's you know, push for a yes vote, now would be your opportunity, and then we'll close it up.
Well, this was my 5th time bargaining, so I have an opportunity to compare it to other experiences. This was obviously unique, no doubt. To everybody who's listening, and I think I speak on behalf of the entire team, including our staff, this contract is historic in a number of ways. It was historic, obviously, in the way that it was negotiated all online, and, you know, everything digital, and, you know, that had some advantages and disadvantages. But the gains that we achieved in this contract were truly better, much better than what some of the worst case scenarios that we were presented with. And members can feel very proud of the way that their union stuck it out on behalf of state employees and refused to knuckle under and let the budget be balanced on the back of state employees. Did we take a hit? Are we sharing in the pain? Yes, we are. But we did not allow ourselves to be victims. I feel very, very proud of that. And I hope you'll all communicate that with other employees. You know, nobody got a pony, but we got a lot in this round of bargaining, and we should feel that we did quite well, all things considered.
Thank you, brother. And thank you, Steve. And I know President Yestramski had to jump to another meeting, but again, thank you all for attending. So with that, we encourage you to get to the link, review the documents, and vote yes on your tentative agreement. Thank you so much. Have a great day.